Hello. It is always embarrassing to hear a paragraph about yourself before you go give a talk. Anyway, my name is Danielle. I'm thrilled to be here with you all at 2 p.m. on day 2 when we all should be napping and sleeping. And if we were in South America, we would be siesting right now, so thank you. And if I see you sleeping, I don't blame you. It's fine. So I'm really here to just place everything that we've been talking about, the value of building up a critical minerals supply chain in a regional context, and also to provide just a general legislative update. What is the 119th Congress doing to support building up these domestic critical minerals supply chains? And then how is Missouri as a state and the Midwest in general really positioned to benefit from building up the midstream and then also, supporting our active and diverse mining industry that we all already have going in Missouri, and how can we, build up supply in this state, and how are these regional innovation consortiums and tech hubs, propelled by universities like Missouri S&T, really supporting and basically creating industrial policy in the United States. At Burns McDonnell, I wear a bunch of hats, but one of my main hats is just to make sure that all of our clients understand what's happening in DC and how does that trickle down to their projects. And I'm a native Kansas City, Missouri. I'm native from Kansas City, Missouri, so it's just nice to see all this investment getting funneled into this region. Where's the clicker? Oh, here we go. Anyway, I always like to start these talks with kind of a global perspective because this is a global issue. All of you already know most of this, but these are graphs from the International Energy Agency that released their Global Critical Minerals Outlook, published a couple weeks ago. And basically across the globe, based on their analysis on public announcements for production projects, we're seeing a diversification of mining across key mineral groups here. In the upstream across the world, across many different countries. But when you look at the refining picture, there's a much more starker contrast there. As we all know, the top 2 minerals, refined producers, Indonesia for nickel and China for cobalt, will produce over 3/4 of the world's growth in rare earth separation and also other materials separation. So there's really a chokehold held in the midstream that's recognized by governments and the world that needs to be answered. But that being said, we are seeing a diversification in rare earth separation technologies projected into 2035 due to announcements in the US, which Chris just touched on for rare earths projects like MP Materials. And then also Malaysia, they're going to start increasing their production of rare earth oxides away from concentrates due to their export bans. And also there's some announcements from Lynas in Malaysia right now. This kind of diversification in the rare earth space really kind of highlights the value of policy and investment support in these key midstream pieces that are missing across the globe, and also help us understand that we need to get the midstream up and going, but policy helps. And if you also look at the IEA report, the public finance announcements for critical minerals projects has really been rising across the past couple years. The governments are using a bunch of different financing instruments listed on this graph here to support critical minerals supply chain development, and the United States alone has given over 25%, has announced over 25% of that total 100% in commitment to various critical minerals projects. So the US government in particular and related to other countries is on board with building up supply chains here. And in 2026 alone, the US has mobilized over $7 billion in indirect and direct funds to critical minerals projects. So what is Congress doing to support critical minerals projects? It takes a long time to get anything through the US Congress, but I like to think about it as there's 4 major policy themes and legislative themes that the bills are kind of focused on in the US Congress right now. We've got our resource development bills and legislation. How do we secure ore feedstock? How do we mine more here? How do we process and manufacture? That's another main policy theme that I like talking about as well, and that our Congress is doing kind of different things to move that forward. Workforce and innovation is a big one. How do we stay competitive as a country? How do we secure the right people and make sure they're happy and living here? And then how do we permit and actually move through with project delivery, which is an underlying theme for across all of these policy issues as being a problem. And I really just see Missouri and the Midwest as being a success story for each of these policy themes. So I'm going to go through the rest of the talk. I'm going to focus on each legislative policy theme, and then I'm going to give examples as to why the Missouri is really poised to succeed in this realm that we have going, and poised to succeed once some of these bills get passed. I'm not going to talk about what the Department of War is doing, because Chris mentioned a lot of that in the previous talk, and I'm not going to focus too much on what DOE is doing, but we heard a lot from DOE yesterday. So the first one, resource development. There are 3 bills on here that I want to bring up. Congress, they love their acronyms. The America Act is the first bill. I don't know if ChatGPT made that or an intern in the bottom of a basement building in the House. But the Mineral Extraction for Renewable Energy and Critical Materials Act, or applications. So it allows the Secretary of Interior to lease federal lands for exploration and mining of hard rock minerals, basically amends the Minerals Leasing Act to expand opportunities for more mineral development on federal lands. This is a bicameral bill, started in the House and is now also has a Senate version. It passed the House and it's advanced to the Senate floor. It actually passed through Senate E&R committee, which is a big deal. And it's currently waiting for full approval on the Senate floor. If it moves forward, that'll just, make more federal lands available for mineral development, which will help mining companies in the U.S. Then there's the Mining Regulatory Clarity Act, which is basically providing a workaround for the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals 2022 ruling on the Rosemont litigation, which functionally amended the 1872 General Mining Law to require that mining claims used for mine waste must also contain valuable critical minerals. This was a problem for a lot of mining companies, and this Clarity Act is basically saying, no, you don't have to have valuable minerals in your mine waste if you want these claims. Now you can, as a mining company, locate as many mill site claims as you want and as reasonably necessary for your operations on land. This is a bill that is also bicameral. It has a Senate and a House version. It passed in the House just recently. It passed out of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, and it has a lot of bipartisan support in the House and the Senate. The next step for the Mining Regulatory Clarity Act is to actually be signed into law by the President if it passes through the House, if it passes through the full Senate. So that act is actually moving and may move soon after the midterms. And then there's the Earth MRI Reauthorization Act. As you all learned yesterday from your Missouri Geological Survey colleagues, Missouri has received a lot of support from Earth MRI. The funds that established that program and funded that program through the IIJA actually expire at the end of fiscal year 2026. So we need to get moving on getting this act going. If you haven't written to your senator or your congressman yet to support this act, please do. But this act is basically going to extend the program into 2031, and it'll expand the scope too. So the scope of Earth MRI in the statutory text of this language will include focus on critical minerals, focus on geothermal systems, and also some natural gas language as well, and then using more modern remote sensing technologies and getting digital geochemical databases set up as well. Through that funding, through the Reauthorization Act of Earth MRI. So that's a big deal. And so how can Missouri really benefit from these laws and legislation? I don't need to go into the slide too much, especially not in the room of mining engineers that I find myself in today. But we have a healthy, diverse mining industry in Missouri. We have high potential in southeast Missouri for extraction of other types of critical materials and metals. Like I said earlier, Earth MRI has already supported the state in a variety of ways, and it sounded like through a variety of permits that other states haven't gotten yet. And also only 4% of our land is federally owned, apparently, which is positive when you're trying to move forward new projects. And then I had to just show the BLM's recent renewed 36 mineral leases for Doe Run's operations in southeast Missouri. So we're really poised. as a state and as a regional innovation center to just continue mining and continue exploration. And Congress is there. They're wanting to also support this as well. I mean, I know it takes forever to get anything through Congress, but it's happening. So moving on to my next legislative theme, which is processing and manufacturing. You know, how do we as a country process more? We've been talking about processing and separation all day, so I'm sure you're all tired of hearing this, but these three bills, acts that I have listed here on the slide, are just Congress's attempts at trying to address this problem using different legislative strategies. So the first one is the Critical Minerals Security Act, and this is basically saying, hey, DOI, DOE, get together, write a report, give us this biennial report each year. Give us this report every other year that'll give me a status on what is going on in the globe for critical minerals supply chains, where are all the resource distributions, and develop strategies, which you'll give me in this report, on how to strengthen mining, refining, separation, and processing technologies in the United States. So it's basically saying, hey, government, you know what's going on. Tell us how to implement strategies, which we then will make into legislation and hopefully promulgate into law. And then once that law passes, we can build up the midstream. This is led by Senator Cornyn in Texas. They had a business meeting on this bill in June, which is basically the equivalent of a House markup. And they have one amendment to the bill, but it's about to move through the Senate E&R committee to get voted on. So hopefully that moves forward in general. The other way that Congress is trying to build up the midstream is by authorizing, hurrah, another DOE program. But this is the Domestic Critical Materials Processing Pilot Program. And the only reason I put this bill up on here is because this program is the statutory text of this legislation is basically telling DOE to support processing projects, but also to analyze the different financial tools that DOE is providing to these clients and to these projects to see which ones actually influence market dynamics. So it's really a shift in a statutory sense from asking the government to just fund projects to asking the government to see if the way that they're funding projects is helping them go through the valley of death and actually move on to commercial scale. So which is interesting, and it's a teasing way to get to the midstream and get it developed in the United States. It's only been introduced in the Senate right now, but there is progress in the House for a companion bill, and it is bipartisan, so that's a good sign. And then we have the Magnets Act. I'm sure the rare earth aficionados in here have heard of this act. I've heard about it for the past 6 years, and I've heard that it takes 10 years to publish tax law or to pass tax law through Congress, so we're over halfway there. But this is just a bill that creates production tax credits for rare earth oxides and magnet metals, and also permanent magnets. So this is just another way to encourage domestic refining in the United States, past what the Department of War has already done in regards to offtake agreements for MP materials. But just another, instead of all these carrots, let me give you a stick. So Congress is on board for setting up the midstream. They have a disparate way in which they're trying to do that, but there is a realization that we need to get separation going in the United States, and specifically, I think, in Missouri. So how can Missouri benefit, right? I'm going to take a step back now and talk about all of the recent funding announcements coming out of NSF and the Economic Development Agency, and focusing on how these different programs are really supporting the midstream. So if we think about the NSF Regional Innovation Engines Awards, right? These are building long-term regional innovation ecosystems. They're funded at really large amounts, $160 million cooperative agreements tied to milestones. They need to build capital groups associated with these projects, and they are really trying to attract companies to move to these regions, right? And so there were two that were funded associated with minerals and materials. One is the Alaska Critical Minerals Program, which is supposed to build a hub for regional responsible critical minerals exploration and extraction. And then the other is in Kansas City, Missouri, the Critical Materials Crossroads Initiative, which is also building another hub and innovation center for the acceleration of critical materials processing and manufacturing, and really trying to attract that key midstream to Kansas City region and Missouri in general. So we have these longer scale, large term regional innovation centers, and then we also have the supplementation of this with the Economic Development Agency tech hubs, which are more kind of place-based infrastructure and commercialization projects. And as you all know, Missouri S&T and all of the consortium members won the only EDA Tech Hub Award involving critical minerals and materials. So that's really exciting. Missouri is not receiving an isolated federal investment, right? It's part of this bigger, broader federal strategy to support setting up these regional critical minerals innovation systems at a high level. And there are, of all of the recent awards being announced, 2 in Missouri, which is a big deal, and I think supports the recognition that the federal government is seeing this place where we are right now today as a key place to set up the supply chain. And then you have everything that the DOE is doing, which I obviously just had to list to say, you know, they're investing a lot of money into this space as well, into setting up processing in the United States, including the metallic program, which we just heard about last night at dinner. So what is the Missouri Senate doing? So this is how the state is investing in getting processing and manufacturing going. So just last month, they passed Senate Bill 1553, which basically is now creating investment tax credits for eligible companies. Beginning in January 2027, companies can get these tax credits if they produce something that's called a critical material. The definition of the critical material is in that blue box. That's from the statutory text. But it's basically any metal or metal complex included on the list of critical materials as published by DOI, which there's some semantics there in that, but we could talk about that later. But it's a tax credit where your minimum capital expenditure has to be $5 million, and you can only, your maximum capital expenditure can be $40 million. So in my mind, this bill is really supporting projects that are in that early stage, like, you know, that are doing site preparation work or facility construction or buying or purchasing equipment to retrofit their facilities that they already have for these earlier stage processing projects. So, you know, the state really has realized, hey, we got to support these companies coming here. Let's follow the tailwinds of what the feds are doing to support the midstream development, and let's provide some sticks to companies. The other thing that's interesting about this bill is it did create a grant program, but the grant program has no money associated with it because this bill passed after the budget was already passed through the legislature. So there are some current lobbying efforts in Missouri to amend the existing statute for this grant program to give it a bit more teeth and have it invest in critical minerals exploration and processing projects through the language of another bill that was introduced last year. So we can talk more about that offline, but potentially there's a grant program in the future to be made to develop processing in Missouri. And then there's some gaps for the Midwest to fill. These are just some of my ideas, and you can shoot me down if you want later, maybe over a beer. But let's talk about 2 key critical minerals, copper and nickel, right? We have an established copper refining industry in the United States, primarily located in Arizona and Utah, but yet we create a lot of copper concentrate. We actually export some of it, but we still remain a net importer of refined copper cathode and unwrought copper because we just have a lot of demand, like it doesn't meet our supply. Our demand is outpacing our supply. I think this provides an opportunity for the state of Missouri, where the mining companies in Missouri actually process the chalcopyrite that we learned about yesterday into copper concentrate. I know it's at smaller amounts of magnitudes, but this still, the contracted milling companies that are producing this copper concentrate still have to then ship that material out of the state. I think this provides an opportunity for Missouri to consider keeping these copper concentrates in this region and refining them into metals and cathodes. Just an idea, and I think there are a lot of companies looking into this here for the Midwest or Missouri to bank on. Then there's also nickel, right? So we don't have a primary nickel refinery in the United States. I think the last one that closed, that was in operation in the United States, closed in the 80s. And Eagle Mine, for example, ships all of their nickel concentrate to Canada. I think this provides an opportunity for Missouri, and I know there are companies like USSM and some in Oklahoma that are not in commercial operation yet, but are, want to produce nickel, copper, cobalt concentrate. And so there's an opportunity then for Missouri to, stand up and actually produce those materials downstream into sulfates as well. So there's just a lot of opportunity. Oh, and then in Oklahoma, I didn't mention, I was just talking about this over lunch, but West Wind Elements has a pilot facility in Oklahoma where they're creating class 1 nickel metal. They need feedstock, they really need feedstock, and they need help building up a demo scale facility. So why aren't we working with our neighbors to get that going and either supply feedstock or just work together on federal strategy and funding strategy? So there's a big opportunity for Missouri to rise up and become a leader in the midstream, and I think that the state government is supporting Missouri right now through investment tax credit development. The feds are obviously supporting this idea as well through all of the recent investments in the state, and I think that it's a nice opportunity for us all to work together towards. Then I have to talk about workforce and innovation, or Rhonda will get upset, our key workforce person here. But this is another legislative theme. How do we remain globally competitive? There's 2 bills up here that I want to talk about, mainly the Mining Schools Act, which I'm sure most of you have heard of. But this is Senator Barrasso and Representative Owens' bill. It's bicameral, it's bipartisan, it's attached. There are currently efforts to attach this to the National Defense Authorization Act, which is a must-pass bill, in 2027, which is exciting. And it requires the Secretary of Energy to provide $10 million every year in grants for mining education programs. This type of act is super important and something that Missouri could benefit from in general, and states that have engineering programs. And the fact that Representative Owens is about to get it attached to the NDAA is a big deal, and the Senate as well. There are a couple senators there that are also going to support that should it go through the House. So that's something to keep your eyes out for. There's also the Unearth Innovation Act, which, surprise, surprise, establishes another program through DOE, but there is $100 million appropriated, that will be appropriated and associated with that funding. With that bill, and ABET accredited mining schools can also use some of that $100 million if it becomes law. This is a bipartisan bill in the Senate, and it's only been introduced, but it still is, Congress's way to try to support getting our workforce up and going. And obviously, Missouri is really uniquely advantaged and positioned to benefit should any of these laws go through, and in general, both the Critical Materials Crossroads Initiative and the Tech Hub here all want to support and build up the workforce, and those are key aspects of their grant programs that they have to comply with. So that's a big deal, and we're advantaged to benefit from those types of funding programs. And I know I only have 5 minutes, but permitting and project delivery, I could give like a whole hour-long talk on permitting reform, but you would for sure fall asleep. But this, there's a bunch of bills moving through Congress right now. The only one that you should look at is the first one, which is the Comprehensive Senate Permitting Package. So the Senate, EPW, and ENR committees basically have taken the SPEED Act, which is the piece under that first bill, and they've taken the SPEED Act and other acts that have moved through the House and are merging these all together into one permitting package. They want to include, some changes to NEPA. They have to talk about permitting certainty, like dealing with the veto power that the executive branch has right now on approved permits is a problem. There's a lot of changes to the Endangered Species Act and the National Historical Preservation Act in these bills, but everything is wanting to get to faster timelines, shorter review timelines, and then judicial review and litigation reform as well. So keep your eyes out for the permitting package. You're not going to see anything until after the midterms, but that is moving forward. And then in general, the agencies are just continuing to implement their permitting reform policies, whether promulgated through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act or through Trump's executive orders on permitting reform through their respective NEPA handbooks. And everybody benefits when permitting gets faster, right? It's an opaque process. But yeah, Missouri and all the states, honestly, will benefit from permitting reform. But yeah, that's my talk in a nutshell, and I can really leave it on this slide, but I just wanted to say, you know, all of the moves coming out of the federal government, you know, what Congress is doing, and then also what the state government is doing is really positioning Missouri to succeed, to set up the midstream here, continue mining here, and then also eventually build up a whole ecosystem and industry as well. So 198 million already announced. Do we have any questions? I'm not going to go to my thank you slide, but hopefully you'll see that we are poised to succeed as a state. That's all. Nobody? Nobody. Which of these bills will pass? Oh, Scott.
Thank you for a very informative talk. You list a lot of the bills on here. Is it easy to go and read the text as they're getting marked up and to understand what's going on? And what's the best way to communicate with our Congress people and senators? Thanks.
Well, I think the best way to communicate with your congressmen and your senators is just to call their office. Like, they always have someone answering the phones. They have to have someone answering the phones, technically. And then once you make that initial call, like say you're supporting the Earth MRI Reauthorization Act, you would verbally state that to them. They're supposed to actually record that in writing. And then you can also just send letters as well. Or you could join some of these congressional visits days groups that are going up to DC, like through the Geological Society of America, for example, or through the American Geophysical Union. They always have CVD visits, and they always want scientists to come with them. And especially as you would have to go not as in your official role as a DOE employee, but you could just go as a constituent of wherever you live. So I would just make the phone call first. That's what I would do. Yeah, and yeah, reading the bills and the markup. I can send you a link to where you can read marked up bills, but I always just go to congress.gov and they'll show you where in the legislative process a bill is and where you can go then to read the markup version. Congress.gov with the number. That's all you need.
With that, please join me in thanking Ms. Woodring.